morning, the US Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump has some immunity from prosecution for official actions taken while he was in the White House. The landmark decision is likely to delay his trial for interfering in the 2020 election.
What presidents can and cannot do. Today's historic ruling means a president can never be prosecuted for anything that's part of their official duties, but they do not have immunity for non-official acts. So what does this mean for the criminal cases against Donald Trump?
The U.S. Supreme Court recently decided that Donald Trump has some protection from being prosecuted for the official actions he took while in office. This significant ruling is expected to push back his trial related to his interference in the 2020 election. It highlights the boundaries of what a president can do while in their role. This historic decision means a president can't be prosecuted for anything linked to their official duties. However, they don't get a free pass for actions that aren't related to those duties. So what does this all mean for the criminal cases involving Trump? Well, here's something quite astonishing. In all of American history, there's never been a sitting president who openly attacked two Supreme Court justices by name on social media, especially justices he himself appointed. This wasn't a former president or just a candidate. It was the current president of the United States calling out Justices Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, two of his own choices for the court, claiming they were disloyal. Then, in an unprecedented move, he actually predicted that the Supreme Court would rule against him in a case about birthright citizenship. Imagine that, a sitting president openly guessing his own legal loss before any ruling has come from the court. And it gets wilder. He used this prediction to undermine the court's future decision, framing it as a betrayal by justices who should owe him loyalty because of his appointments. Seriously, how crazy is that? This isn't how things are supposed to function. What makes this situation particularly important isn't just the drama. Remember when his supporters stormed the Capitol chanting, "Hang Mike Pence"? They were furious with the vice president for not blocking Joe Biden's certification as the president. Pence even had to be evacuated from his office after he was asked to find more votes. What's really at stake here is what this reveals about how this administration interacts with the judicial branch. It sets a concerning tone for every court across the nation regarding what Trump expects from the judges he nominated.
As his supporters stormed the Capitol building, they chanted, "Hang Mike Pence," angry with the vice president because he refused to block the certification of Joe Biden as president. Mr. Pence had to be evacuated from his office, and a local official and asked him to find more votes.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780.
I want to share a bit about what happened on May 10th, 2026, when Trump had quite the meltdown. He posted something pretty wild, and I think it's essential to highlight his exact words. Those details really matter for understanding his message. He suggested that maybe Neil and Amy had just been having a rough day, but he threw in this dramatic claim that our country can't deal with too many significant decisions before it starts to crumble. He even said the court would likely rule against him on birthright citizenship. What really caught my attention was how he claimed that justices appointed by Republicans seemed to be intentionally going against him. It's fascinating, or maybe puzzling really, that he implied they should be loyal to him, the president who picked them, rather than to the Constitution or the law or any legal precedents their decisions should be based on. Here we have the sitting president saying that Supreme Court justices owe them personal loyalty. That's quite a departure from what the American legal tradition holds. Before that day, this idea was pretty clear-cut and accepted. Justices are not meant to be puppets for the president who appointed them. When you put it all together, it's hard to wrap your head around his perspective. Now, to give you some context, there was a significant ruling back in February of 2026 that led up to this dramatic outburst. The Supreme Court had ruled 6-3 against Trump's global tariffs, a decision reported by NBC News and Politico. Trump didn't take that news sitting down. His reaction was downright fiery. He labeled the ruling a disaster and called the justices who disagreed with him fools and lapdogs. It was a bizarre moment, directing such harsh language at Supreme Court justices. But that ruling also revealed something about the dynamics within his own court. Justices Gorsuch and Barrett were among those who voted against him. So it's not hard to see how those decisions were really weighing on his mind when he made those comments just a couple of months later. It's honestly hard to believe how Trump reacted when two of his three Supreme Court appointees sided with the majority to overturn his cherished trade policy. Rather than seeing it as a legal decision that simply differed from what he wanted, he took it as a personal betrayal. He views the justices voting based on their legal judgment instead of their loyalty to him as a lack of fidelity. This perspective he's adopted led to his outburst on May 10th. This situation is wild because it points to a deeper issue than just losing a case. It reveals a flawed idea of what the Supreme Court's role is supposed to be, which is fundamentally, constitutionally, and historically incorrect. Then there's the birthright citizenship case, known as Trump versus Barbara. That's being looked at. Oral arguments for this major immigration case, the most significant the Supreme Court has tackled in decades, took place on the 1st of April in 2026. The 14th Amendment states that anyone born or naturalized in the United States is a citizen, and this has been consistently interpreted since the 19th century to mean that being born on American soil grants citizenship no matter the immigration status of the parents. That's the basic constitutional truth. Now, Trump's executive order tried to change that interpretation, attempting to say that kids born to non-citizen parents wouldn't get automatic citizenship under the 14th Amendment. Lower courts challenged this order and blocked it a number of times, ultimately sending it to the Supreme Court. So, the oral arguments happened, and then, on May 10th, well before any ruling came out or the justices indicated their decisions, Trump jumped the gun and announced that he expected the court to rule against him. He predicted his own loss and launched an attack on the justices he assumed would vote against him, aiming to undermine their credibility before any official decision was even made. It's just striking. This ruling, which could have major implications for the citizenship status of millions of children born in the country, is anticipated by June or July of 2026. Yet, here we are with the president already telling everyone that if the ruling goes against him, it's due to his own justices being disloyal. It's a pretty crazy narrative he's spinning around a decision that hasn't happened yet, and that narrative is likely to influence how everyone processes whatever ruling eventually comes down the line. I find it quite wild that a president would publicly insult his own Supreme Court nominees on social media. It's not just the immediate drama, it raises serious concerns about the court's legitimacy. You see, the authority of the courts, especially the Supreme Court, comes from public trust. Their decisions impact everyone in the country, and for them to be respected, the public has to believe those decisions are based on sound legal judgment rather than political favoritism or personal connections. When a president suggests that justices should show loyalty to him, claiming those who disagree are being disloyal, he's really undermining the very foundation of the court itself. It sends a message that the public should judge Supreme Court decisions not on whether they adhere to legal principles, but rather on whether the justices sided with the president or took a different stance. This completely shifts the narrative. Turning legal analysis into a loyalty test harms the court's credibility, affecting how it's viewed long after any specific ruling, and it's happening while cases are still pending, with justices discussing decisions that could influence the meaning of American citizenship for many years to come. Now let's dive deeper into the significance of Trump's comments about Gorsuch and Barrett. This isn't just some political jab, it touches on the core of our constitutional framework, impacting how we understand the role of the judiciary. Judicial independence is essential. It's why federal judges serve for life and are kept free from political pressures. This principle is embedded in Article 3 of the Constitution, designed to ensure decisions are made based on law and not the whims of those in power. The Founding Fathers set up a system where federal judges keep their jobs as long as they're doing a good job, and they can't see their pay cut while they're serving. This was done specifically to protect judges from political pressures, ensuring they can make decisions against the president or Congress when needed without fear of being fired or having their salaries slashed. They knew that a judiciary that bows to the wishes of whoever appointed them isn't really independent. It just becomes a tool of that power. An independent court system, one that can say no to the president when the law demands it, is a key part of a constitutional democracy. So when Trump claims that justices should be loyal to the people who put them in their positions, he's really pushing to tear apart that setup. He's suggesting that the constitutional safeguards for judges, like lifetime appointments and pay protection, should mean they owe personal loyalty instead of having the freedom to make independent legal judgments. It's honestly hard to believe he said that out loud. That argument is not just wrong, it completely flips the purpose of those constitutional protections on its head. Let's break down how these talks can undermine the judiciary, because it's more complicated than it seems at first glance. When there's a case being considered by the Supreme Court, the justices are deeply involved in thoughtful discussion, reviewing legal briefs, and hashing out opinions. It's a serious process that takes time and effort. Now, this all unfolds while political drama is swirling around them, especially with the president who appointed 3 of the current justices publicly expressing what he expects from them. Sure, Supreme Court justices are seasoned professionals who should be able to keep their focus on the law, no matter what the president is tweeting. The court has seen political pressures before and managed to keep its integrity intact. However, the kind of preemptive attacks on the justices, like what was directed at Gorsuch, can mess with the judicial process in subtler ways. Barrett has created a bit of a mess, and it reaches further than just putting pressure on the justices who are making decisions. It actually affects how the public views whatever decision comes out in the end. If the court rules in favor of Trump and decides to eliminate birthright citizenship, some folks will see that as proof that his loyalty argument worked, suggesting that the justices bowed to pressure from him. On the flip side, if the court goes against Trump as he expects, then his supporters will frame it as the betrayal he warned would happen. No matter what, his preemptive strike makes it tough for the public to view the eventual ruling as a result of genuine legal analysis. The credibility hit happens even before any ruling is handed down. That's some strategic damage to the court, and fixing it won't be easy. Looking back at the pattern of Supreme Court losses during Trump's second term, the tariff ruling and the birthright citizenship case aren't just random occurrences. They fit into a clear trend of the court showing real independence, which has really frustrated the administration's boldest policy plans. For instance, the February ruling tossed out the global tariff strategy that was supposed to be one of Trump's main economic tools. Lower courts have knocked down his executive order on birthright citizenship and other immigration measures. In fact, courts have repeatedly found that the administration has overstepped its legal authority in areas ranging from firing civil servants to claiming emergency powers. The consistent theme here shows the administration pushing a broad interpretation of executive power, but even courts with a strong conservative and Trump-appointed majority are pushing back against the more extreme claims. This trend isn't a sign of some sort of judicial conspiracy against Trump. Rather, it shows that the courts are just doing their job, assessing whether executive actions are legally upheld and sometimes determining that they're not. Unfortunately, Trump's approach turns this reality into a story of disloyalty rather than an independent legal assessment, transforming a standard constitutional interaction into a narrative of personal betrayal. It's this betrayal narrative that fueled the post from May 10th. With enough losses piling up, it's hard not to notice. When you start to see judicial independence as personal opposition, it suggests you've hit a point where the way you think the legal system should operate just doesn't match its foundational design. Let's talk about the implications tied to the birthright citizenship case. This is where the real constitutional significance lies, regardless of what Trump tweets about his justices. For over 150 years, the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment has meant that anyone born on American soil is recognized as a citizen. If that interpretation gets overturned, and we find that children born to non-citizen parents aren't automatically citizens, it would be one of the biggest shifts in constitutional law in recent American history. Think about the vast number of people this could affect. There are countless children who've been born and raised in the United States, holding American birth certificates, who might suddenly face challenges to their citizenship or even have it revoked if the court sides with the administration and removes the blocks on the executive order. Immigration and civil rights organizations are already highlighting just how widespread this impact could be. For those who stand to be affected, the stakes are incredibly high. Their citizenship status, the legal ability to live and work in the place they were born, along with all the rights and benefits that come with being a citizen, are all on the line. Trump is publicly framing this case as if it's all about loyalty. If his appointed justices vote against him, he's suggesting they're disloyal. But for the families who could be impacted by the ruling, these aren't just political stakes, they're life stakes. It's pretty wild how there's such a stark contrast between the serious implications for those families and how the president is treating it as a loyalty test. This really says a lot about how this administration approaches governance. Looking ahead to the political side of things, we have to consider the timing of the birthright citizenship case and Trump's attacks on his own justices. It's all happening right in the midst of the midterm cycle. The Supreme Court is expected to issue a ruling on birthright citizenship by June or July of 2026, landing right in the heart of the midterm campaign season. If the court rules in favor of Trump and ends birthright citizenship, it could dramatically change the landscape. It's really something how this whole situation with Trump and the Supreme Court justices is playing out. No matter which way the court decides, it's going to create a political firestorm as we lead up to the elections. If the ruling goes against him, as he seems to expect, he's already primed his supporters to see it as a betrayal by those disloyal justices. Instead of accepting the court's decision as a constitutional choice, he'll frame it as a grievance to rally his base around issues that resonate, like civil rights and immigration justice. What's interesting here is how Trump is setting up a narrative focused on loyalty rather than the legal merits of the case. He's already taken shots at justices like Gorsuch and Barrett, ensuring that when the ruling comes down, it won't just be about the law, it's going to be about perceived loyalty. This strategy, making it about judicial betrayal, masks itself as a legal complaint, but is really a political tactic that will shape the conversation in the months leading up to the elections. At the core of all this is Trump's stance that Supreme Court justices should owe loyalty to the person who appointed them, which raises some serious concerns about the independence of the judiciary. It's not just a criticism of a ruling, it's a call for the Supreme Court to act more like an extension of the executive branch instead of maintaining that crucial independence. This kind of thinking undermines the constitutional framework, which was meant to protect judges from such pressures with lifetime appointments and salary safeguards. Countries where judicial loyalty to executives is expected tend to have weaker rule of law, contrasting sharply with the robust independence we aim for in a constitutional democracy. So as we watch the situation unfold, it's clear that this goes way beyond just a single court decision. It touches on fundamental issues of judicial power and independence that could reshape our political landscape. So here's the deal. The president is out there publicly questioning the loyalty of the Supreme Court justices he himself appointed, and he's doing this during an ongoing case. This kind of moment is pretty significant in our country's history, and it definitely deserves a spot in the record of his presidency, alongside all the other times we've seen these kinds of institutional clashes. Now, the loyalty argument he's pushing, it's not just off base, it's a dangerous notion that threatens to turn our judicial system on its head. What's especially concerning is how he's framing the upcoming decision on birthright citizenship. The angle he set up will heavily influence how his base reacts, no matter what the ruling says. If the court ends up ruling against him, his supporters will see it as a betrayal from his own appointees rather than just the court doing its job. This means they're ready to react with anger instead of acceptance, viewing the court's decision as a personal attack. When that happens, any attempt to convince them that the ruling should be respected and followed runs into the narrative Trump has created. If he's already labeled a decision as disloyal, he's essentially giving his followers the green light to reject it. Now think about the implications of that. A sitting president critiquing his own appointees' decisions encourages people to disregard Supreme Court rulings. This isn't just about one ruling on birthright citizenship. It's also about whether people believe that the court can legitimately interpret the Constitution when its conclusions don't align with their views. The damage to the court's credibility from this entire situation could have long-lasting repercussions that are tough to fix. People need to trust that the Supreme Court's decisions are based on genuine legal reasoning rather than political favoritism. But that trust isn't universal, and there has always been some level of political debate surrounding the court's decisions. The way people perceive the court's decisions really hinges on whether they think those rulings come from the law itself or the politics behind who appointed the justices. When the president argues that justices should be loyal to him personally, he's taking a direct shot at the very foundation of the court's legitimacy. It's pretty telling when he suggests that followers should judge court decisions based on loyalty rather than legal principles. Once that mindset takes hold, every subsequent ruling will be evaluated through this lens, focusing on whether it aligns with Trump rather than whether it's backed by solid constitutional principles. This mindset can have a long-lasting corrosive effect on the institution, impacting it well beyond any single president or ruling. Institutional legitimacy takes a long time to rebuild once it starts to crumble. There was a specific moment on May 10th when things took a turn for the worse, and that moment has been documented. As the ruling on birthright citizenship looms, there are some key things to keep an eye on. First, it's important to see if the court goes for a majority opinion that directly tackles the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment, or if they find a narrower route, focusing on procedural or standing issues that sidestep the main constitutional question. A direct ruling would stir up significant political and institutional repercussions. On the flip side, a narrower outcome might be less conclusive legally and not as sensational politically. But given the context Trump has set with his earlier criticisms, it would still attract major media attention. It'll also be interesting to observe how justices like Gorsuch and Barrett respond to Trump's attacks. Typically, justices keep quiet when faced with presidential criticisms, but whatever they ultimately decide in the birthright case will be scrutinized for any signs that Trump's comments influence their legal reasoning or thinking. As the ruling date draws nearer, I'd expect to see more posts from Trump on social media, likely ramping up his attack strategy. This pattern could intensify and build on the legitimacy issues we've already noted. Lastly, it'll be worth watching how congressional Republicans react in the aftermath. So here's a situation that unfolded recently. It's about how loyalty is perceived between the president and the Supreme Court justices. There's no denying that a sitting president, who happens to be Donald Trump, publicly took shots at two justices he chose himself on social media. And this happened while they were still deciding on a case. What's even more surprising is that he predicted he would lose that case before they had even made a ruling. Trump made it clear that he believes justices should owe personal loyalty to the president, and he really didn't hold back. He even called justices who disagreed with him in a previous case fools and lapdogs. When it comes to an upcoming ruling on birthright citizenship, a case that could have huge implications for millions of people born in the United States, he hinted that any decision against him would show disloyalty instead of an independent legal opinion. This whole scenario is unprecedented in American presidential history. It's not just the prediction he made or the loyalty argument, but also the fact that he called out justices by name on a pending case, all of which was captured on May 10th in the year 2026, thanks to Fox News and his own posts on Truth Social. This moment is now officially part of the record, showing how Trump views the relationship between the executive and judicial branches. As we await the ruling, which should come by June or July, the consequences of that decision will be layered on a narrative that Trump himself constructed. The ongoing theme of loyalty versus law is likely to shape not just the immediate news cycle, but also the longer historical perspective on how his administration has interacted with American democratic institutions. So stick around, because when that ruling finally comes down, it's bound to be a major turning point in this entire term.